Hello, and welcome to the Joy CEO podcast. I'm your host, Lori Pine, and today you are in for an extra special treat with my guest, Justine Clay. Not only is Justine a leadership expert for creatives with her marketing background, but she's also an ADHD coach. And I cannot wait to get into it with you because I think some days we all think we have ADHD, but Justine is actually going to take us through what it means to actually have ADHD and how she works with high-performing men and women in the creative space. So for those of you who are tuning in, thank you and welcome back. And if you're new to my podcast, I'm so glad to have you here with us. You picked a special day to come. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, Justine.
Hi, Laurie. It's so great to be here with you.
Yes, and you as well. And I feel like I've been so privileged. I joined this community of consultants and coaches and have met just extraordinary women. And you have been one of those special people I've gotten to connect with. So thank you.
Oh, well, right back at you. It's a special community of wonderful people.
Yes, yes. So for anybody listening, that's the upside with Erin Helper. And we do love it. It has been really wonderful. So Justine, tell us just a little bit about yourself and what makes you so special.
I love the question. Toot your own horn, right? So my name is Justine Clay, and I am a business coach for creative entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals. And I'm also an ADHD coach, as you mentioned. That's something that kind of came a little bit later in my career as a supporter of creative professionals. So my background is I started in talent management and representation in New York City in the late 90s and early 2000s, which was an incredible time for, advertising, culture, design, all of these things. So I was really in the mix working with some very high level creatives. And I was essentially the person between the creative talent and the client. So whether that client was a magazine or a brand or whatever, I was the person that was helping them find the right creative talent for a project or a team of people, writing proposals, putting together the project, managing the project, and then, doing all of the invoicing and all of that stuff. So I was essentially, for the creatives, everything but the creative. They did the creative, I did everything else, marketing, positioning, everything. And then for the clients, I acted as a project manager, someone that could find the talent, put them together, and then manage the talent. And they loved that because they could work with people who are fabulously talented without having to deal with, maybe unpredictable creatives, right? So I was always that kind of like facilitator position, middle person position, before I even realized that's what my job was. And I loved it. So creatives have always been my people and supporting them. And, after the recession of 2008, when the industry just got really hit, what emerged out of that, I don't want it to seem like it was a quick thing, but what emerged from that was I wanted to support creatives in a broader way than just representing a handful of elite creatives. I saw that creatives in general, especially independent folks, but even people inside of, organizations, agencies, brands, they struggled with the business side of things. And there's multiple reasons for that. I have since learned and understood over, the last 25 plus years, not insignificantly, that they were always taught that as creatives, they were, this whole right brain thing. You're not good at business. You're not good at money. You're not supposed to be. You can't make money from creativity. If you do, you're selling out. So many stories that people had about creativity and business and money, right? Like these things just not meeting. And so I was like, you know what? I can help people with this. I can teach them the creativity. I can teach them the business side of creativity. And essentially the premise was I'll teach them to be their own agent. And so that went great. And as that went along, during that period of time, I had the first of my two children. And when my first child was about 8, or no, even younger, he was about 4 or 5, we started getting teachers and folks flagging. No one ever said ADHD, but people were like, oh, he's very bright, but he has a hard time focusing. He's very bright, but that was what I always heard. He's very bright, but. And he got diagnosed in the pandemic or just before the pandemic. And, it was just a very challenging time. It was challenging for him. It was challenging for us. And I realized that as a neurotypical person, I thought and functioned very differently from my child. And there's only so much trying to get people to do things the way you want them to do things goes. And I sort of had this realization, I've got to be able to figure out a way to understand how he thinks and operates and meet him where he's at. So I started doing more research into ADHD and the crux of it was I was going to hire a coach who was an ADHD coach to help me help him. And I started looking at this guy's website and I'm like, hang on a minute. All of these symptoms he's describing in adults and kids, but adults, a lot of my clients have this. And, right? It was
on to something here.
It was a penny kind of dropped,
Yes.
And, some of them had disclosed to me they had ADHD. And I was just like, okay, I didn't really pay it too much heed. Really. I just coached them. But as I started to really learn more about it, I was like, oh gosh, I would say probably a third to a half by my estimation probably have it. And then I started to question myself, not in a bad way, but in the way that I think we all need to, especially as coaches. It's an unregulated industry, so you better regulate yourself.
That's right.
Am I serving these folks as well as I could? Given the differences I was experiencing and seeing at home with my child, granted, these are adults, not 4-year-old children, but still. And my answer was, probably not.
I could do better.
I could do better. And we could always do better, right?
Always.
And so it wasn't even like a judgment. It was like a sort of like, oh, what an opportunity. So I decided instead of investing in a coach, I would invest in becoming a coach. So
I love it.
I signed up for like this 6 month, no, it was a year-long program, and we met 3 times a week for 90 minutes. There were exams. I mean, it was like, not like one of these like,
intense
2-day, like you're qualified, situation. And the real thing for me, Laurie, was that all of the women in my cohort, I spent a year with these people, a lot of time with these people. They were all women who had ADHD, and they were all, 30 and up, ranging all the way up to maybe 60s, 70. And they all had such amazing experiences, professionally, personally. And I just got such an insight. And I was the only neurotypical person in the room. And so I was the minority. And it was really so wonderful. It was eye-opening. It was confronting. It was confounding. It was so many things. And I left just feeling like that was just the tip of the iceberg, but so much better equipped to be able to support a range of neurocognitive, styles. So that's really what's brought me to today. That was in 2022 that I did that qualification, but I'm just learning all the time and studying all the time. But it's fundamentally shifted how I see people and think about people and support people.
Well, isn't that just so brilliant? I feel like there's so much for us to unpack, and I
talked
love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so that was so much good stuff to unpack. Let's go back to the fact that you work with these brilliant creatives, and you've had this career in just high-end, fun. I mean, I don't even honestly have the words for it, but just you've worked with these amazing people, magazines, creatives, and you've been able to lead them in a way that sounds like actually transformed into teaching them how to actually run a business, making money. In fact, you have a quote, an Andy Warhol quote on your website that making money is actually an art.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
that's part of what you teach. Yes.
Absolutely. But the creators bring a lot of money baggage into their professions. And it's not their fault. It's what they were, brought up with, the stories they were brought up with. So there's often a little bit of work to undo there and to, sort of rebuild.
I find that working with some of the really ambitious, amazing women that I work with also bring a lot of that to the table and maybe play a little bit small and don't really ask for what they deserve and kind of settle when it comes to money. And they're like, oh, no, just let me go do what I'm good at and the money will all work itself out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's what we were taught. It's not ladylike to talk about money. It's not ladylike to advocate for yourself.
It's not ladylike. And yet the men are, demanding, higher salaries, bigger bonuses. I ran into this HR manager once, VP of HR, and she said that she would often sit in interviews and just telepathically be begging the female candidate, please ask us for more money. We have more money to give you. Mm-hmm. And, of course she couldn't say anything, but all of her energy, all of her body language would just be like, please, please. And more times than not, it wouldn't happen. They would just take the offer and go.
That's right.
Yes. So then you come across your son, very much like my son, who also at 4, showed these brilliant, so highly intellectual, but highly impulsive tendencies. And we too went down, the journey of what was going to happen with him. But it opened up a lot of doors for me, a lot of learning for me. How would I parent him? Very different than my other child. And, it gives you a different appreciation for his gifts and his talents and the ways he shows up in the world and the way he described how things work for him. He actually explained it like a pinball machine, where he would start out with one and he would try to follow it. But then before he knew it, there were like 10 pinballs going at once and he couldn't keep track of them.
Yeah. When people tell me stories like that, it's like, I have so much compassion for them because just like it, and I always say whenever I give like workshops or anything where I've got primarily ADHD creators in the room, I always say to them, no one is working harder than someone with ADHD. I see you. I see how hard you're working. And the unfairness of it all is that people are looking at them thinking, you're lazy, you're flaky, all of these things, right? Like they have so many sort of negative character traits projected on them when it's no fault of their own. And they're also working incredibly hard, And so I think a lot of the work that I do honestly comes from a place of, just feeling a sense of injustice and wanting to stand up for people and support people and say, no, don't treat them like that, like get out of your own head for 2 minutes and, think about how you could support someone rather than trying to force them to do something that you think is the right way. It makes me cross, which is a good motivator. I think in any kind of purpose-driven work, if you feel mad about something, it's a good thing sometimes.
For sure. And if you start with my child, if that's the impetus initially, and then that carries on to, okay, now there's an injustice for this whole group of people, watch out, right? You've kind of awoken Mama Bear.
Yeah, a little bit. And I don't know if you ever felt like this, but, when my children were really little and I'd be at a park or something and a child would fall or something, you would automatically just pick that child up. It's like everyone's child suddenly became your child. If you heard a child crying in a supermarket, it kind of it had this sort of bodily response.
Yes, you're looking like.
Yeah, right. And so I think that sort of just kind of translated, and this is not in any way, and I want to be clear about this, and this is a line I have to walk very carefully of like, the neurotypical person saving the neurodivergent person. It's not that at all. It's not a savior thing. It's an allyship.
Ally. Yes.
Where it's like, I feel like I have maybe a little bit more awareness than some of my, compatriots in the neurotypical world. And, let me spread the word over this side. Let me call people, in this side and support them as well, because no one wants to be a terrible leader. No one wants to, make their people miserable.
No, in fact, I believe that people show up for work every day with the intention to do good and to be good.
Yes.
And that's why we show up. And yet we do all have blind spots or handicaps of some sort. We all do.
Yes.
And so I believe that there's somebody listening right now wondering, do I have ADHD? And how would I know?
Yeah.
And so what would you say to that individual?
Well, my first question is always, why do you think you might have it, right? Because it's one of those things, and this is just so coincidental that like the timing of me doing this work is like has definitely coincided with ADHD being much more out there in the world and people talking about it a lot more, and it's definitely way less stigmatized, So I think sometimes when something is much more open, a lot of people now think, well, do I have it?
Yes.
So that's sort of like the one side of that. But so my question is always to people, well, why do you think you might have it? And then they'll tell me, certain things. And, I want to just be clear here. I'm a business coach. I don't diagnose. I don't do any of those things, right? I've just seen a bunch of people, right? So that's always my first question. And it also really depends on what else is going on. One of the things that I find fascinating about this is, and this is just like my natural proclivity. If I show you the book I'm reading right now, it's called The Master and the Emissary. My husband bought me this for my birthday. Look at the size of this book.
Wow.
And it's called The Divided Brain and Making of the Western World. And it's basically neuroscience, medicine, culture, and philosophy. And I've just started it. It's very dense. But he weaves all of these things together. And so I'm always fascinated by the brain and how it's working. Socially, where do you stand? At what intersections are you living? Because a lot of times ADHD comes with a lot of other things.
Yes.
And what else is on your plate? Right? I know that you work with women who are in leadership roles, so they're going to be of a certain age. So most likely they're going to have demanding jobs. They're going to have teenage children. They're going to have aging parents. They are, what is now known to be the unhappiest years of their life.
Sandwiched in between so much.
Middle age is like where we're most unhappy, right? Because we're just getting like squashed from every side by responsibility. Right. So the reason I mentioned the brain is I'm always interested in like how it actually works. Because if you think about it, unless something's like not working for you, unless you feel brain fog, unless you feel pain, how often do you think about your brain?
No,
not
I just expect it to work.
Just expect it to work. Right.
Yes.
And then we realized that your brain is like the most important thing. Right. But like brain health impacts everything else.
Everything controls
everything, right? So if we're talking about like your demographic, right? And a lot of times my demographic also, but let's say we're talking to women, especially. I work with men too, but it does present and show up differently. But let's talk about your audience. So we've already established that very often they're being sort of squeezed by a lot of pressure. So that's one thing. So they're overwhelmed, right? Their brain is being asked to do a lot of things. They're also most likely going into perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause.
For sure.
Estrogen has such a profound impact on people's brains. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I just actually wrote some notes because I thought, this will be great for like a podcast today. But basically, estrogen receptors in the brain, they live in lots of places, but like primarily they live in the primitive parts of the brain. So they live in the memory part, which is a hippocampus. They live in the amygdala, which is an emotional control. So it's like the dysregulation when we feel fight or flight, that's the amygdala. They live in the frontal cortex, which is where the executive function occurs, where thinking, reasoning, prioritizing, all of that happens there. And also, it touches on the autobiographical memory components, right? So when our hormones are in flux and estrogen basically just disappears, now, like the hippocampus that like does so much cannot be activated correctly.
Can't even function at some points.
Yes. Right? So people are like, do I have ADHD? Am I in menopause? Is this early dementia? Right? Like that's how bad it can feel.
I've asked myself all of those things.
Yes. Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's most likely not dementia, like thanks God, right? It's most likely ADHD and or menopause.
Yes.
What happens is like, in this country, particularly, but other countries too, you go to a doctor and they will give you antidepressants before they will give you HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy.
Yes.
They will give you anti-anxiety meds before they will give you HRT.
Yes.
If you fix the estrogen, especially if the person didn't have any issues before, mental health issues before,
Yeah.
I know for a fact, like I was doing okay in menopause. I was doing fine for the first 5 years. And I was in menopause in my late 40s. And it was almost like a light switch. And I said to my husband, I'm not doing okay.
Mhm.
I didn't feel good.
Right.
And it wasn't anything dramatic. I just didn't feel like myself.
Yes.
Right. And I was just like, oh no, this is not going to fly. I've got too much to do and too much life to live well to settle for this.
Right. This is BS.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went and I got a new OBGYN and because I knew she was, more friendly to these conversations. I read a book. I literally, Laurie, almost had a PowerPoint presentation to pull out. I thought I was going to have to defend my dissertation in there. And I go in and I'm like, I've been like psyching myself up for weeks for this, like to plead my case, not even plead my case, argue my case. And I said to her, I've come to talk about my HRT options. And she said, okay, would you rather have a patch or a pill? I was like, hang on.
You are my people. You are my people.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And literally within a couple of days, I felt better.
Yes. Yes.
And so in answer to your question, you may have ADHD, you may be in menopause, it may be both, right? You may be overwhelmed and
overwhelmed.
Yes.
And trying to do too many things at once.
Yes. And having too many people expect too many things from you. And like you said, women tend to just take it.
Yes.
And so there are so many things we can do. Some of them are like pharmacological. Some of them are social. Like I definitely got to a point where I was just like, you all are going to have to start pulling some weight around this house.
Amen.
I don't care if you don't care if it's messy. I care if it's messy. So like get with the program.
Good, strong boundary.
Yeah. I don't want to raise men who expect like the woman to just like juggle 1,000 plates and make it look effortless. I'm like, it's not effortless. It's really hard. And if I have to do one more load of laundry, I'm going to like just lie down and cry.
That's really important. And I have this beloved mentor and she's been on the podcast recently and she's going to turn a big birthday this month and she'll kill me if I say the number, but I love her so much. And she has said to me before, she said, Lori, you know what you're really guilty of is that you make it look easy.
Right.
And that is it. Mm-hmm. That is really the money.
That's right.
I make it look easy. So people believe me.
Yep.
And they think it's easy. Yep. Meanwhile, I'm dying inside. I'm like killing myself.
That's right.
To do it all.
That's right.
And once that really hit me, this was several years ago, no more. No more.
Because here's the other thing is what we start to realize, and I think this is when like as women, we sort of like, I think there's something very special about your 50s where you just stop caring about other people feeling comfortable around you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I want to be fun and I want to be all of the good things that I always feel like I have been. But I'm also just like, I don't care if this doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a certain element of that, which is wonderful because you can then say, I'm not going to like, burden myself or wear myself into the ground just so everyone else has like a more comfortable, easy life. And also, how hard is it to pick your plate up and take it to the dishwasher? That's not exactly uncomfortable in life.
At all.
Right. And so that's when we start to say, I'm not going to, say, for example, folks who are neurodivergent, I'm not going to mask anymore. I don't have to try and appear to be, in air quotes, more normal or more palatable so that someone will accept me. This is who it is. And then we can just show up with ourselves because I really believe that you are the number one asset in your business, in your life. And one thing we realize when we're in our 50s is if you don't take care of the body and the brain that you have, you're not equipped to be that number one asset. You can't show up fully for yourself, for your family, for your job, for your community, for whatever is important to you. Your number one asset is your body and your brain.
Yes.
That's a big rock you put in first.
Yes. Yes. And to take care of it. I just saw this reel on Instagram this week that when we're in our 50s, we're the youngest, funnest version of the old people.
Oh, I love it.
And so when you get into your 60s, 70s, and 80s,
Yeah.
you go down that slide of the old, quote unquote, old people. So 50s is the youngest, funnest version of the old people.
Amazing. I'll take it.
So we'll embrace that.
Yeah.
We will embrace that.
We don't have much option.
Instead of piling on ourselves, telling ourselves, oh my gosh, I am doing a terrible job because I'm trying to do all the things for all the people all the time, whether they're the little ones or the aging ones, and I'm somehow lost in between.
That's right. You lose yourself. There are so many opportunities for a woman to lose herself in the course of her lifetime. Men don't lose themselves. But
no, they go golfing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do and the workshops that you lead. You kind of have a couple different tracks.
I do. So I work with creative professionals directly. So they can be people who are working in-house somewhere, or they can be people who have their own business or very established independent freelance career. So that's been the main core of my work. What I've moved into is doing facilitation, amongst the founders or leaders of a firm, whether it be a small agency or a firm. Because what happens a lot of times is, brilliant creatives come together and they have a brilliant idea and they start a brilliant business and everybody loves it. But no one talked about any of the stuff that it takes to make the business,
operations, accounting, budgeting. Yeah.
Even roles, values, all these things, and so the wheels start to come off at some point.
Sure, they do.
Yeah, it might be that, someone is expanding their business and they're bringing in new leadership to build a different component of their business. And then they realize, we're talking at these cross purposes. We're both invested in the same thing, but why can we not get on the same page about things? Why is it so hard to talk to this person or to get things done or to understand? A lot of times it's because they're neurocognitively different, right? They speak in different ways and neither one can hear the other. And I somehow am a good translator. And I've been on the inside of so many creative businesses that it's not just about facilitating the interpersonal relationship, but like, okay, so how does this now turn into a framework, into a delivery, into a this, into a that? Like it's everything else that kind of comes from that, right? That's where I'm really most happy. So I do the work with the facilitation work. I do, and this is a newer offering. So this is something I'm still testing is, doing workshops in bigger companies where they have, big creative teams in-house. So that's working with the teams themselves, with the leadership of those teams. And that person in leadership may be neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? So if you're in a team, you're working in a neurodiverse environment. You're working with people who are going to think and operate differently from you. And most of us do not, have leadership skills at all. We figure it out as we go. And secondly, we don't have skills working with, folks of different, cognitive types.
So true.
Yeah. So a lot of that is really about, building awareness, even if people just had a modicum more of awareness, that when someone that they consider as being obstructive or difficult or consistently late, or even if they just said, I wonder if they're neurodivergent.
Yes.
Even that thought alone would be the first domino in a bunch of other thoughts, because you'd be like, well, I don't know, I can't ask them, but if they are, what would that mean for them? Well, go ahead.
Yeah. What would that mean for them? And what would it mean if I wasn't so rigid?
Yeah.
What if I could just meet them where they're at?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, that switch in my thinking, that contrary thinking to my normal thinking opens up a whole possibility.
That's right.
And that can transform a relationship, someone's career, as opposed to you wanting to fire them.
Yep.
You actually see their gifts and their brilliance, and now they're promotable because they're really so talented.
Yes.
If you just would not harp on them that they were in at 9:01 and not 8:30, right? Yeah. And gave them some creative license around how they showed up.
That's right. And the other thing that's interesting about that is that there'll be this question, well, why should people get accommodations? Shouldn't they have to be able to do the job, right? And it's like, we show up differently in our everyday lives all the time. you would talk differently to your mother-in-law than you would to your girlfriend that you drink wine with. And you would talk differently from your girlfriend to your 7-year-old child. And you would talk differently from your 7-year-old child to the teacher at his school.
Yeah.
Like, we adapt all the time to who we're talking to and what the context is of that conversation. We do it all the time. Why can we not do that with the people at work? Why do we decide I'm not going to change, it's my way or the highway?
It's true. And I don't know about your child, but my child did get some accommodations when he was in grade school, and he was allowed to do some things that helped him manage. And so surely as adults, we can extend some of that grace.
Yes.
Formal or informal, just out of being good humans.
Exactly.
Good leaders.
Well, exactly. And, this is where, equity is such an important thing, because equity is not the same as equality. It's not putting everyone on the same level. It's saying this person needs a box to stand on so they can see over the same fence that the tall person can see over, right? You give them a box. That's an accommodation, right? Yeah. You're just making the playing field more even for people.
Yes.
Right? And what's wrong with that?
Nothing. Whenever I drive my son's big pickup truck, I need to sit on a box so I can see over the steering wheel.
That's an accommodation.
Yes, it is.
No one's looking at you and saying she's a terrible driver. She's sitting on a box. She's doing it wrong.
No. So I have to sit on a pillow so I can not wreck his truck.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that is also just, to your point, it's like, who we are at work is a reflection of who we are in general, right?
Who we are as humans.
Yeah.
We don't switch when we walk across the threshold. We don't step into an alter ego. So who is it we are at our core?
Yeah.
And that's who I think we want to bring in to our leadership.
Agreed.
And if we're not doing that today, we have a choice and we can change that.
Yep. And that's the thing. And to the point earlier about, like, could I do better? Yes, I could do better. That's the question that we should always ask ourselves. And it's always, and the answer should probably always be, yes, I could do better.
Yes.
That's not a negative judgment on ourselves. It's just a sort of, it's a question that invites inquiry and growth. Who doesn't want to keep getting better?
I wholeheartedly agree. I'm constantly investing in myself to go to masterminds and retreats and join communities like the Upside, and so that I can always get better, learn more, be around amazing people like you, and hear new thoughts. And
and that builds confidence and more tools and all of that stuff. So that's really what I want to do when I work with teams, people, whatever, because what I realized with moving more into doing some teamwork as well was I was currently just working with the individuals, and it certainly helps to coach individuals. It helps them, it gives them different tools, but I'm like, it's not just on them. It should be just about them being, in, again, air quotes, better, so they fit into a neurotypical environment better, right? That's because it's still challenging for them. So if I can coach both sides, knowing that I am actually of the neurotypical camp, and being like, listen, I know this is hard. I know it's frustrating, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be this hard, and it doesn't have to be this frustrating, right? I'm not saying it's Pollyanna and like, oh, let's all get along and it's easy. It's not easy. But managing different groups of people is never easy, right? That's where you get the big bucks.
That's right. That's right. And if you have the right tools, then you can actually do better. Yeah. And it sounds like you bring some really great tools.
I love a tool because I think that it turns something from talk into something that's actionable.
I love that.
Yeah. So, with my coaching, I always sort of say I'm a sort of a coach/consultant, because a coach strictly just asks questions and has no opinions.
Correct.
I've got a lot of opinions. I've got a lot of
experience. You got a lot of experience.
Yeah. And I'm like, if I know the answer to something, why would I withhold that from someone? Right. And I also like a tool, because a tool is something that they can now use, or a framework, or a something that will make it real and actionable for that person. And the idea is that tool is something that they can adapt, or I help them find a tool that works for something they could do. Rob, like, use this tool. Well, it doesn't really work for me. I forget to look at it. Well, look at it. That's not, put it in your calendar to look at this thing. That's not working. That's
No.
sort of the old advice, right? So we've got to figure out, well, what will work? Where do we see things naturally?
Yes.
Right. A lot of times we've got to visualize things for folks who have ADHD, because if it's not visual, if it's not out there to be seen, it doesn't exist.
That's right.
Yeah. So even just this knowledge, if you're like, okay, I'm working with someone and they're consistently late, or they consistently struggle with multiple deadlines, could we make it visual and put it on the wall?
Yeah.
Where they can see it.
Yeah.
Right. Things like that. And also asking the person what works for you, because they have spent their entire life testing every damn tool out there. They can tell you what will work for them too.
They will know.
Yeah, I don't want to be in meetings because they're really hard for me.
Yes, certainly back to back to back meetings.
Yeah. Don't make them sit in back to back to back meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so then as the leader, you have to be willing to go to bat for that person also.
Yeah.
Because there will be resistance to that. Well, they should go to the meetings. They have to go to. No, they don't. Right. So it's not easy. But, I have a very good friend who said doing the right thing is always harder, more expensive, and takes longer.
Yes. But the payoff should be far more bountiful.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. It's a shortcut to not do that.
Yes. And the ripple effect of that touches more people.
So many, so impactful. I mean, if you think about, all of us can think about a good leader we had and a terrible leader we had.
Bingo. I got them right in my head.
Right?
Both faces are in my head.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And the bad leader, made you feel bad about yourself, made you question yourself, made you feel terrible all the time, whatever it is. Right. And those are things that we hold that. We carry that with us. We don't really forget it. It gets less, poignant over time, but it doesn't go away. And same with the positive.
Yes. That's right.
Doesn't go away either.
That's right. Yes. It becomes so good in your soul.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Justine, this was such a pleasure. Tell us where we can find more information about you and your services.
Okay, great. So my services are, I do one-on-one coaching and I do group coaching for creative professionals and entrepreneurs. I do facilitation and offsites for, teams, leadership teams. And I also do talks, presentations, workshops for bigger, for teams within a bigger company. So you can find out more on my website at justineclay.com. Best place to find me.
So good. What a pleasure to have such a lovely conversation with you today.
Thank you for inviting me. I so enjoyed it.
Oh, me too, Justine. Thank you so much. And to all of you listening, we are so glad you are here with us. Have a tremendous day.